without love is pleasure. Lust with love is passion. Love without lust is pristine. Love with lust is poetry. Lust, viewed as a cure for our dullness, an experience that brings fulfillment within our meaningless existence, a shameful sickness, an addictive disease that has corrupted and warped our society. How we frown upon ourselves when succumbing to these urges to satisfy our deepest, darkest desires. For many, it's a way of life. For myself, it is a beautiful reflection of ourselves. Why must humans be ashamed for their own beautiful ways? Is it not human to be driven with lust? Why bring torture upon oneself to keep those desires hidden away from this miserable, mundane world? Why feel ashamed for these inner tendencies when those who demonize you have desires that are far more creative and darker? For myself, I envision lust as a canvas for poetry, to weave a beautiful high, an opportunity to use skill and imagination to bring a passionate aesthetic into something that has been terribly dulled out with such primitive intentions. In my wonderland, it is an art that rewards one's senses of taste and touch with something experimental, something that is unfamiliar, forever imprinted in one's mind. Even in the shadow of this cruel world, I view lust as an artistic sin that will never fail on bringing a smile to one's face. But for today's tale of terror, my friends, takes us to a paradise, a world that is not for everyone, but for those who are helpless on challenging themselves with new ways to satisfy their sexual urges. That within the world of human lust, there are those who tend to wander into the darkest parts of this world, helpless to the overwhelming desires of uncovering new experiences after growing tired of the sexual activities on this mortal realm. Like a moth being drawn into a flame. The gentleman you see before you is one who had ventured deeper into the shadows of lust, and has successfully reached his own wonderland when calling upon the Cenobites, rewarding him with everything he desired plus more. My friends, this man, whose name is no longer important, this mutilated torso hanging on hooks, surrounded by flesh and bones artistically fashioned and molded into reflections of an imagination that had reached a new level of creativity, for his pleasure now resides in the hands of an artist. His mistress, rewarding him with the given name, My Sweet, for his body and soul now belongs to her, the goddess of this paradise. Beyond the pain, the intense craving for her caressing touch, the sensations that would send My Sweet into a wave of ecstasy when she would come, slicing his flesh with uncanny precision, the waves of pain that would arouse him when she would peel away bits and pieces of My Sweet for her works of art. Did you know that there are pieces of My Sweet within the greatest of her creations? Oh, how he truly desired his mistress, that beyond the physical pleasure, somehow My Sweet had been infected with these inner feelings, something that he never felt before, a warming feeling that would leave My Sweet desiring more. Could it be that he had fallen for this demonic mistress, the only woman who had managed to bring this man to his knees? If he could only share these feelings, tell her how he truly felt when she would look at her precious lover. Except, when My Sweet was first brought into this paradise, the tongue was one of the first things to go. God, how much he desired her, to feel her, to taste her, these urges to love her. How much he wanted to tell her this. But it wasn't long before trouble came to paradise, and My Sweet began to experience the torment of this unusual high, these warming feelings being soured when seeing the delivery boy bringing new meat for the mistress, the one who brought him into this paradise, My Sweet. Realizing that his sexual bliss was being infected with a strange madness, an inner struggle to deny the scenery before him, trying to deny telling himself that there was another reason why this delivery boy kept entering her domain. Was he reading too much into things? every fiber of his being trying to tell him that he was wrong. As time progressed, my sweet would find his denials being crushed and come to learn the painful truth of this wonderland, a pain that struck deeper than anything he had ever imagined when witnessing this delivery boy tasting her flesh, those hands caressing her pale body. How blind my sweet had been to ever think that he had been blessed with a fantasy. The cruelty of knowing his heightened senses would be the instruments of torture. My sweet feeling everything that he desired in the air happening right before him, the ultimate sexual experience that he had desperately craved since feeling her touch, everything being given to this delivery boy. The passion when seeing her hands running down his body, razor-sharp fingers cutting into his flesh, this was something more than physical satisfaction, a love that my sweet had never known with any other woman he had tasted. It was passion. God, the unbearable pain when they would share their pleasure right before him. How she relished the tears coming from the eyes of her precious sculptures that surrounded them as they made love like none other. A passion that grew more intense as her precious meat sculptures wished, even prayed for them to stop. And his mistress knew this. She felt it in the air, the lust, the love. For the first time, my friends, for my sweet, this was truly hell. How can one deny these intense feelings for this mistress? No matter how hard my sweet had tried hating her, her cruelty would always end with him loving her. This man, who is nothing more but a pitiful, weeping flesh strung up on hooks, realizing how much of a fool he was when seeking the ultimate thrill, his sexual expectations of paradise is but a mere fantasy when realizing that he's just material for the Cenobite. My sweet, a name that is meaningless and given to all her sculptures, mere decorations, works of art for her warped fantasy. Yes, she is aware of the souls who are brought to her domain, those who were seeking the ultimate sexual satisfaction, foolish souls not knowing the depth of their desires. After all the women my sweet had used to satisfy his pleasure, like every soul that ended up here, had reached their limitations on the mortal realm, grew bored of what the world had to offer, and sought out the Cenobites when wanting something more, something greater. And yes, the Cenobites understood this void, and they had delivered. My God, how they were all fools, how they were given a new level of sexual high when being infected with these unfamiliar emotions. It was love, a love for their mistress. Beyond physical pain is a pain that far exceeds one's wildest imagination. It is a love that would have these souls slowly descend into an unexpected madness. No matter how much my sweet tried hating her, the hatred for his mistress had only driven him deeper into wanting to love her. My sweet, helpless to the horror of being deeply consumed with this desire for her. And even though my sweet had maintained his struggle of blocking out the ecstasy between his mistress and the delivery boy, he had almost missed that small moment of satisfaction. How my sweet relished the inner pleasure when seeing the inner sadness corrupting their love. Their passion being incomplete with knowing that the delivery boy had no lips to kiss her with. But love in this paradise is strong. Even in hell, love is worth the sacrifice. And when my sweet would witness his mistress comforting the delivery boy's sadness, soothing his rage with her delicate touch, that was when my sweet began to develop an intense fear, for he knew what was coming when she spoke of making sacrifices, that their love for each other was greater than even the most proudest of her creations. Imagine the undeniable horror overwhelming my sweet. Would be quite the show for a man who viewed women as nothing more but pieces of meat to satisfy his primitive ways. Is it not exciting to be on the other end? To be a mere object for one's pleasure? A sexual high of being truly expendable? Faced with the undeniable reality that you are no longer a man, but property to be toyed with and disposed of on a whim. Is it not amusing when seeing my sweet trying to deny the inevitable, the reality of what's to come? To cling on to that sliver of hope to ease his thoughts, that out of all the others in this wonderland, she wouldn't choose him, her proudest creation. His mistress would never ruin her proudest work for this delivery boy. But when feeling the passionate touch of his mistress, my sweet stricken with the intense terror when knowing that out of all the sculptures, she chose him, my sweet, trying to grasp onto this need to hate his mistress when feeling her cut into his flesh, trying to think of a fantasy of murdering and inflicting the worst form of torture upon this twisted woman, and no matter how hard he tried, these were thoughts that never came. Peeling the flesh away from his face, dear God, my sweet still loved her as he watched her place the strip of flesh onto her lover's face. And all that my sweet could hope for within this paradise is that his mistress would use the rest of him up for her twisted creations. Spare him from the torment. But why would a Cenobite goddess waste such good suffering, knowing that it only brought more passion into her realm? Imagining the immense torture that my sweet would experience when watching this delivery boy passionately kiss her with his own lips. So what do you think, my friends? Should this soul be spared from this twisted wonderland, or continue enjoying the artistic horror show as an expendable piece of weeping flesh? Until next time, my friends, thank you for watching the show. The Horror Show.